Hello and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. Today's special selection comes at us from Oystein. It's the 7-minute track off their latest album, The Duality of Decapitation and Wisdom. Great two-piece rock group, and they play great rock music. Great two-piece group, and they play great rock music. All right, I can get behind that. Let's dive into this. We're looking at the band VEILBURNER. This track is pretty lengthy though. Visions of Hex-Shaped Hiss, Behead the Howling Spirit. We are looking at something exactly at 7 minutes long. It looks like the album is the same title. Yeah, so this is the title track. Let's dive into it. See what's going on with some VEILBURNER. Kind of thrown into this, huh? So 7/8 right here. Some interesting sounds on the outskirts of it. We have this high-pitched drone in there too. Lots of interesting textures and layers. The vocals are getting distorted and reverberated out to the sides. Okay, that was a fun little drum pattern to pull us into this. Another 7. They really like these asymmetric rhythms. Back to this. So just this driving movement underneath everything, that guitar. Very texture though. That drone, man. Oh. Detuned? Digitally detuned. Yeah, dude, like the walls are dripping here. Back to the atmosphere and driving energy. That was a fun little drum fill. Ooh, oh, that ride cymbal work. Yeah, okay, that's kind of neat. All right. All right. I don't think my expectations were right on that. I don't know. I was expecting something a lot lighter. That might have just been me. This song is very much focused on texture. There's some rule of cool riffage in here. There's a couple of faster moving riffs. The drum work can get fancy at times. I do love when the drummer picks things up a bit. But yeah, I mean, most of this is just texture work, which is it's interesting in its own right too. Because the song kicks off and we have this funky 7-beat idea, right? And I conducted it out for you. I counted it as like 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, and it kind of lurches us back into that beginning of the phrase. 1 beat earlier than we would expect. 1 beat earlier than if we were just consistently doing 4-beat bars. But I think also what they're playing there, their rhythmic accentuation patterns, the melody itself, it further accentuates the asymmetry of this 7, especially once we ditch the first riff and then we bring in that digga-dut, digga-dut, down, digga-dut, digga-dut, down, and we bring that rhythm in. It's very jagged, just even in and of itself, but it presents a specific rhythm of sound to silence that we then undercut when we come in that beat early. And so it feels like, once again, we're being thrown into the next bar too quickly. This is something that comes up a lot in here. In fact, most of the time that I was like, oh, that rhythm's a bit odd. I went and counted, it's in 7. And they really lean into it. They use an odd time signature, and then they create these melodies and rhythms to go along with it that are obtuse as well. And it just compounds on itself, and it creates a song that I don't think it's difficult to figure out the general pattern of the accents, where we attack, when beats begin, but it consistently creates something that pushes against the norm. It is a song that wants to feel like it's constantly tripping you up. And it does. Like I said, I picked up the time signature right from the start. It didn't take long, and rather quickly, my body movements lined up with what they were doing. It wasn't difficult to catch on to what they were doing. It's just that they're consistently throwing out awkward ideas, and it creates a song that feels very antagonistic. At least to me. In many of the places where it's guitar and drum focused, those are the moments when the song really says, hey, I don't want you headbanging. I don't want you dancing or anything. I don't want you rhythmically moving your body to me. I'm going to throw you off any way I can. And on the one hand, I think that's pretty cool because the song doesn't end up feeling bad. I didn't dislike listening to it or anything like that. There are certainly songs where the rhythmic element is so esoteric that I'm just like, why am I even listening to this? It's not even just that there's a lack of groove, there's just a lack of rhythmic pattern at all. It's just noise. Some people may like noise, harmonically, melodically, rhythmically. I'm not a fan usually of any three of those being noisy. I don't need pop music, but I need something to follow along with. But I found this to be generally palatable in the rhythmic area, despite constantly trying to throw me off. I found it fun trying to figure out how they were going to switch things up and following along with their attempts to throw me off. I thought that was kind of cool. It's like being on a mechanical bull, you know? Let me restate that. I don't feel like I emphasized or enunciated that correctly. A mechanical bull. Part of the fun is, you know, it trying to get you off of it and you trying to stay on top. That's kind of what I felt like with this song. It was a fun little puzzle, a little dexterity game to play with it. But it does create this antagonistic vibe that I think leans into another element of it. There are plenty of sections in the song that go for a 4/4 feeling. These are usually where the vocals kick in. I don't know if that is anything other than a coincidence. It might be that the vocalist, I was going to say that they only want to sing in 4/4. Maybe their rhythmic attention is best in 4/4. But there's no singing in this, honestly. I felt like I was being told a story by a goblin. We're going to touch on that in a second. I kind of jumped the gun on that. It's in 4/4. The guitar doesn't have a lead part anymore. In all of these sections, the riff does change, but there is just a cyclical going up the scale, coming down the scale, going up the scale, and there's no resolution or a strong sense of resolution. There's no rising and falling tension. It's just going in circles. No movement at all, completely static. These sections, well, the drums too, they're sort of sit on the backbeat. They kind of calm down a bit and focus on keeping a core tempo. Now, granted, there are some very cool flourishes, particularly in the ride cymbal, that we get to see in some of these moments, but for the most part, the two instruments that have dominated the song are taking a back seat to the vocals, which are very clear here. I can't make them out. I think a lot of that has to do with the tone of it, the harsh vocal that's being used. But generally speaking, the vocals are very clear, present in the mix. They're center stage in the spotlight. And then there's a lot of texture going on along the sides. It creates an atmosphere here. The vocals have some wild reverb going on. In the center, they're clear, but you can hear on a slight delay a syllable that was just said here now exists on the outskirts. But it's not just an echo. Now they're warbly and distorted. They are getting larger, almost like they're dissipating into air, becoming harder to see the details of as they get further from the source. But there's also a high-pitched whistly drone, like an alarm thing going on up here too. And then there's just some other sounds. I don't know if they're instruments. It almost sounds like samples. I couldn't pinpoint any specific thing saying, oh, this is definitely, like a beaker full of bubbles or something. But I got the idea of like being in a goblin wizard's laboratory, right? And he's got me chained up to like this wooden board, and he's got me like leaned backwards, so like I'm like this, but I could see what he's doing, and he's just monologuing at me. That's what the song put me in. And I'm like, I don't understand you, dude. I don't know why I'm here. I don't know how I've wronged you, but you are obviously pissed at me. And that's how I felt listening to this song, while also thinking, is that a fire alarm? Did you leave one of your Benson burners on? Should we address this drone going on up here? And I don't mean to poke fun at the song, but this is where it put me in my mindset listening to this. There's so many textures going on here. And I think that's kind of cool. They're doing a lot of sort of environmental storytelling with non-traditional instruments. I think the guitar and the drums, I mean, they're there, but they're foundation. Everything else is digital, maybe? I don't know, because honestly, like I said, I can't really pinpoint what these sounds are for the most part. But it creates something that feels very overwhelming, very overbearing, and very dangerous. I mentioned that the 7/8, the off-putting rhythms, all the wild stuff at the beginning of the song, and in pretty much every other obtuse rhythmically obtuse section of the song, creates an antagonistic feeling. It's a song that doesn't want me to enjoy it. It doesn't want me to groove with it. It is doing all that it can to make me lose my attention and walk away from it. This is also an antagonistic section, primarily just because it feels noisy. It's gotten rid of so many traditional musical elements to it. There isn't really a sense of melody here. We don't really have harmony. We have a static chord existing beneath everything. We do have rhythm, and the drums are doing some neat stuff from time to time, but for the most part, we have a human metronome going on down here. And so all of the information here is texture, it's sounds. We have the goblin vocals, we have the alarm, we have the reverb on the sides, we have white noise. Um, it's not non-traditional musical ideas. And this is really all that the song does. We hear the goblin monologue against textures and sounds, and then we get an obtuse rhythmic idea, and then we hear the goblin monologue along textures and sounds, and then we get a different obtuse rhythmic idea. Um, and the song just sort of bounces back and forth between the two of those. There are some variations within them, but that's uh, that's kind of it on like the global bird's eye view of the song. There's differences in the minor things, but that's kind of the whole song for me. And so this brings me to the vocals. I mentioned these already, and I want to come back to them because there is no harmony here. We're not being sung to, we're not being growled to. It just says words at us. This is interesting because as often as I find indie rock, Midwest emo, even post-hardcore at times to use spoken word, metal just isn't a genre that I think does that too often. Even when it comes to harsh vocals, which can be rather monotonous, there is still a rhythmic component to it. It doesn't feel like speech. oftentimes, it even has a hip hop rapping element to it, depending on how fast a growler wants to engage with the rhythm, how frequently they want to shift up the rhythmic ideas they're presenting. But even when we just have a rather straightforward growler, it's not spoken word. It doesn't have the same nuances and rhythms and flows of speech. It's still singing in a sense, even if it's not traditional singing. It it follows a lot of the ideas that we relate to vocal performance rather than speech, rather than conversation. This feels very colloquial though, very conversational. There just happens to be sounds and musical ideas around this vocalist, but they're just reading things to me. They're just talking to me. You just don't get to hear that too often in metal. And I think that's what helps paint this narrative picture for me. It also, I kind of find the lyrics, not the lyrics, I don't know what they are. I find the vocals endearing in a sense. It isn't, it probably just is a voice, right? This dude wanted to do some harsh vocals. This is a harsh vocal technique he found that's safe. It doesn't hurt his throat or make it scratchy or anything, so he does it. But to me, it feels like a character. A lot more so than any other harsh vocal I've listened to. Even bands who use their vocals to showcase characters. I don't know how intentional this is, but I really enjoy that element of it. It should honestly be campy, and it isn't. I kind of really liked it. Now, granted, I think the overall song just isn't my cup of tea. I found very little in it that I legitimately enjoyed, that I would casually want to listen to again. But dang, this is a charming little thing here, right? They told me a story with drums, guitar, vocals, and some noises. And while I'm not a real big fan of how all that came together, it still presented a story to me, a narrative. I saw stuff in my mind. That's not something metal always does, and so I gotta give credit where credit's due here. That's pretty cool. I'm going to take a second here to read some lyrics, and then we're going to wrap this one up. All right. Yeah, this is... Well, here's the deal. There's a lot of circulatory language in here that makes me wonder if this is actually philosophically interesting or just seemingly profound. Actually saying nothing with a lot of fancy words. I don't know, because a lot of it goes right over my head. The very first stanza. Until the end, for all souls, the hardest thing is not to prove its existence, but to be sure of its destruction. Enslaved by this existence, more tragedy than evil to shoulder all the cosmos. A phantasmagoric view beyond the material that will matter more or less. Abyss above the abyss, whose truth confront the others as lies eager for worship. Phantasmagoric. Why couldn't I say that? What does that mean? That our existence is meaningless. That we should only be sure that our existence ends. And for the weight of existence to hover over us is more of a tragedy because it forces us to attempt to do things now. Like, there's a part of me that wants to read this as we're so focused on the here and now that we don't realize how small things are in the greater scheme of things. A lot of people want to be remembered, but you have at best 100-ish years here out of your billions, infinite amount of years of non-existence. Why does this matter? That's sort of what I'm getting out of it. but I'm not entirely sure. This next stanza, though, the devil himself trains you as he is you, the beast external and eternal human in every form, the soul and its sojourner, always one's own Achilles, a wound that never heals. Yep, nope, right over my head. The final stanza, you yourself betray yourself as wounds that will exude the death of 1,000 lifetimes, an internment for the perils that you always bury, a projection that you cast onto everyone else, never to be a violation of existence, but a volition of wisdom. Again, what? All of these stanzas are separated out with the title of the track. The altar of the serpent is between the head and neck. Ill visions of the hex-shaped hiss. Behead the howling spirit. I don't know. There are parts of it where I think that there is something of a bit of depth there. Maybe a bit more nihilistic than I would prefer, but seemingly they're onto something. But then I read another line and I'm like, you're just spouting words. Maybe I'm just too dumb to get it. That's possible. But at the end of the day, I do feel like it pushes towards a more nihilistic view of things, and I'm not usually a big fan of those. What any of this has to do with being tortured by a goblin and being monologued at, I don't know. Maybe if I understood more of it, though, I could make some connections with the music. But until then, these are my thoughts, my first reaction to VEILBURNER's Ill Visions of Hex-Shaped Hiss, Behead the Howling Spirit. Let me know what you thought of this. If there's anything that stood out to you, anything you'd like to add on to what I said, correct me on, just give me any sort of context on, I suppose. You have your own interpretation of things or just any thoughts about this in general, put all of that stuff down there in the comment section. Above that, in the description box, you can find a link to Linktree. Takes you here, you can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today, but I'll be back tomorrow, 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 10 p.m. UTC as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening, whenever you choose to watch my videos.